Hello lovely people, welcome back to another tutorial with me, Lisa Taggart, and to the fabulous Fairy Craft Festival of July 2023 with Lavinia stamps. Today I get to play with lots of new stuff, including the magical Dinkles, the powdered inks and some brand new stamps. This project is called Patience, and we'll be exploring a number of mixed media techniques, including how to create the bokeh, which is the blurred background effect, and also how to balance colours in a project. So, if you're interested in all of that, let's take a look at some of the tools and materials for today's tutorial. First up is the masking sheets from Lavinia Stamps, and these are very useful. Also the lovely watercolour card and a few bits of scrap copy paper. We'll also be using the stamping press that I've got my Tonic Tim Holtz one. Anyone will do. I've also got some hairspray or pastel fixative, a couple of brushes, a large and small, along with some water. Also scissors for cutting out our masks, and some applicators for the pastels, and also the putty eraser, some water and also white gesso. In terms of the colouring materials, we're starting off with the VersaFine Clair inks in Nocturne, Rainforest and also Warm Breeze. We're also using PanPastels in this project. Now I've pulled out rather a lot. I'm starting with the Hansa Yellow, also the bright yellow green and the pearlescent yellow. You only really need one yellow, so don't worry, just pull out what you have. Also in the greens we've got pearlescent green. We have this lovely phthalo green tint, and also we have the phthalo green shade, both lovely colours. And finally we have the chrome oxide green, so one light green and one dark green would be enough. Some of the other colours, raw umber, yellow ochre and burnt sienna, and these are to add some earthy tones. Also of course black and white, which are always useful in any project. I'm also using some pastel sticks for this project just to add some extra depth of colour. They're not necessary, they are optional, and they are very similar colours to the PanPastels, so stick with the PanPastels if that's all you have. I'm also then of course using the new Dinkles, which are wonderful, very similar colours, amber, sepia and Payne's grey for the earthy tones. And then we have the pine green and the sea green. We also have the yellow and the lime divine. And finally the magenta and porcelain, an interesting mix. This is the lime green stickles for some glitter, and also some Posca pens. We've got dark pink, light pink and turquoise. And we've got our gel pens in yellow and white, and sparkle pen in gold, and the Stabilo all black pencil for some shading. We're also using the Clean Colour Zig water brush markers, and I've got pinks, peaches, brown, green and a light lilac. Sorry you can't really see the colours there in the light, but any watercolour markers of the similar tones would do. Now for the stamps and the stencil, and here's the wonderful Erwin, the Vine Branch, the Forest Flowers and also Fern Heads, which is an older stamp. This is the stencil which we're using for the bokeh effect, and it's called White Orbs, and it's a very handy one to have altogether. So if you want to convert all of this into something a little like this, just keep on watching. First up then we have our watercolour card, and I've taken a sheet, this is A4 size, and our large brush for some water, and all I'm doing is spreading a thin layer on top of the card. Hopefully your brush will be clean, unlike mine. Not to saturate it too much, but it doesn't really matter. The idea is that the ink powder will have something to seep into. So we're starting off with Payne's Grey, and I've put a little hole in the top of the container with a pokey tool, and these are magical, aren't they? You can see how they spread out and create beautiful organic shapes. Now, I have in my mind, I suppose, when I'm putting these colours out, some sort of landscape in terms of having leafy, yellowy tones towards the top for leaves coming from the tree, some sky coming through, and then towards the bottom I'm thinking of branches and trunks and ground and flowers. So that is sort of dictating which colours I put where, but really at the end of the day it's potluck. You can see there I'm using the earthy tones towards where I think will be branches, and then I'm just going to give it a good old squirt with some water and let the powders mix. And because this is a little bit too, I'm also adding magenta, don't forget that's my favourite colour, and some white just to tone down the centre a bit. So as you can see, it is quite strong. So I'm doing my technique where I put another piece of watercolour card on top and make an ink sandwich, as I call it. And that means you've got two prints, and it takes away some of the intense layer. Obviously it needs maybe spread a little bit more, and there I do that and spread it out a little bit, and also dab it where you think it's too dark, etc. And then take them away for drying. Now they're dry, you can see how they look, and I've decided to take the crazy looking one. And then we're starting off. So we take a little bit of masking sheet and our lovely stamp, and we're going to create a mask for the owl. There we go. It doesn't matter that it's not too dark. Now I'm just going to cut out the shape of the body. I'm not worrying too much about the feathers around the edges because I'm going to add those later on. It's really just to protect the body shape. And there we have our mask. So next you can see I've trimmed down the crazy colours to 7.5 and 8 roughly, but it doesn't really matter. 8 by 8 would be fine. I'm taking out my stamping platform and putting that in place. I have a sticky sheet underneath as well. I'm seeing whereabouts I want to put my owl. I'd like sort of light behind the head, and decided there's good enough. I'll give it a good ink in my Nocturne permanent ink. And the beauty of the stamping platform, of course, is that if it doesn't come out dark enough in the first stamp, you can have multiple goes, and particularly when you're stamping over the top of the Dinkles, which are quite strong and maybe a little bit bumpy in places, that's why I've chosen to use the platform in this occasion. But if you've a good stamping hand, you can do this project, of course, without a stamping platform. Now that that's good enough, I'm putting on the little mask to protect what's underneath and move on to the next stage. So PanPastels, I've just taken out a number of colours here, just as I say, use a basic, if you've got earthy tones that would be great, but if you've got a light green, a yellow, a dark green, white, black, and maybe, as I say, maybe an amber colour, that would be good enough. And what I'm doing here is quite intuitively, I suppose. I'm thinking about, again, where branches might be. I'm wanting to darken the sides of the owl, and particularly at the bottom. And I'm thinking that there's going to be light shining through on the right hand side, the top right hand side, and I'm creating some contrast. Now it looks a little dark at the moment, but it will be blended in. As you can see, I've started that process off already, and it's, as I say, quite an intuitive process. You look at what you've got in the background and you try to enhance it, and also bearing in mind that you're creating dappled leaves and light in the background. So I'm adding some darker greens, some mid-tone greens, and of course light in the form of yellow and white. And I'm also creating then the light source, which is on the right hand side there, and making sure that that is a paler area than the rest. But really it's whatever you whatever looks good to you in terms of your background. A good mix of dark, medium and light tones, mixing greens, yellows and whites, pale blues as well. Now this is what I've got in my hand is a putty eraser, and if you've gone too strong and you don't like what you've put down, this is a great wee thing to use to take away things that you don't want anymore. It's also a useful tool to help blend some of the colours together actually. You can see there that I'm adding some more darker tones into the mix, and it is, as I say, quite often in these projects a bit of a dance where you're going back and forth and you're taking a wee look at how it looks, blending it in and changing it out if it's too strong, etc. Okay, now taking our stencil, and I'm starting off with my finger and rubbing some of the colours through, and very similar to the blended background, I'm using the same colours all over again and a variety of different size circles. It really doesn't matter. As you can see, you're just building up lots of little different coloured circles, and there'll be a mix of lighter ones around the right hand side of the owl, and then as you go out to the edges of the picture there'll be darker green and mixing in light blue, etc. And none of these pictures will be identical, as with the little inks that you, or the powdered inks, the Dinkles. When you use them, no two pictures will be the same. So it's very important when you're following this tutorial not to think that you have to produce exactly the same. That would be impossible. What you're doing is seeing the creative process and using the techniques to go with the flow and look what you have and see what you think would enhance the background and what you think would look good on top of the mix of colours that you have. And basically it's the same all over again here, adding in very random circles and as I say, a wide variety of colours and shapes and sizes, so that it looks a little like this, and adding dark towards the edges because you're thinking about leaves in the background. And I do an awful lot of fussing, as you know. You don't have to do all this fussing. Sometimes it's best to leave it as it is, take a photograph, have a good look at it on your camera. Of course I don't, I carry on. Now this is an interesting thing as well. Swipe what you've done in broad little lines with your fingers out to the sides, and what you'll see is the pastel will blend like light rays, and it's quite easy to do, and don't overdo it like me. So this is why I have to use the pastel sticks to add in some colours again. But it's up to you. You don't have to do so many layers. I sometimes don't know when to stop and get too excited. but I really did want to add this turquoise colour into the background, because part of what we're doing today is seeing how to balance out colours, because you start off with a really crazy mix of colours and you think, how on earth will I make sense of all of this? And this is how. You take it in layers and you decide what your landscape is going to look like and you go for it. And here you can see I'm not even using the stencil, I'm going freehand with little dots of colour here and there, and I'll use my fingers to blend them in. And this all adds to the effect of the light in the background. And you see there that I'm concentrating the white just in that little area. And you just keep going until it looks good. And if you can't see when to stop, as I say, the best thing to do is to take a photograph and see how it looks in the photograph. I try to do that, but sometimes I get carried away. Now finally the fussing is over and we can see that we have created contrast between the background and the little owl, which is what we wanted to do. And just to make sure that that is emphasised, I've taken my black Stabilo Wall pencil, which is water soluble, so don't get it wet if you don't want to get your whole picture covered in black. And I'm also taking the white gel pen to add the light in that little area as well, just on the edges of the feathers. And I'm doing this before I re-stamp so that it goes over the top. So back into the platform again, putting it in exactly the same place. And I never removed, I should have said that, I never removed the oil from the platform so that it stamps in the same place. That's very important, that when you leave the platform, you leave the stamp in place. And just going over the top to add the little external feathers again. And you also have your black pencil if you can't get all of them quite deep enough. But that's good enough, I think. Now I'm taking the little mask and I'm cutting out the feet, which isn't easy, but I want to have the little claws and feet covered because I want to stamp over the branch, and I don't want the feet to be covered by the branch. I want them to be in the front. So there you are, that's the little mask back in place. And I'm taking this beautiful new stamp with the gorgeous branch and all the little leaves, and I'm going to use the platform to stamp this in place. And there you have it. So at this stage I've decided to spray the pastel with some hairspray, and you can use pastel fixative as well. It's just that we're going to do some more stamping, and it's best to have it fixed before we do that, just to take away some of the powderiness of the pastel. So I'm putting my mask back in place because I'm going to go over the top of the oil here with the branch and the leaves. Now what I noticed in the background is that I have these glorious little patches of pink, so I thought they would be ideal places to stamp our lovely new flowers. And I'm taking the smaller sized one first of all. And I'm not stamping up the whole stamp because I think I'll hand draw the stems in later. And then this is the second size in the set, the larger one, and really beautiful stamp. And I'm taking advantage of, as I say, those pink areas that I have in the background and creating some lovely flowers. And I'll be colouring those in later on. There we go. Now I am also then adding some black to darken out the branch and to restore the stamping that isn't quite visible there, and also extending the stem down. I didn't want it to be too dark, and where some of the stamping hasn't come out as dark as I'd like, I'm using the pencil there as well. So they're all in place and time to remove the mask, and it's shaping up. But before we do some more colouring, I'm taking the Rainforest Green, which is a beautiful dark green, and I'm adding in some extra foliage to the bottom. And I love these fern leaves. I think they've got a beautiful shape and they're adding a nice contrast to everything else. I didn't want to cover the entire bottom quarter of the picture, but I think it's just enough to add some to the side. And there we are. So I think that's the composition in place, and I think the bokeh is complete finally as well. I've added in a few wee dots of pastel there in the background in the amber colour, and I'm moving on now to some background leaves. So I decided that I wanted to create some distant leaves in the background, and to do that I've chosen this pale blue colour, and I'm not inking up the entire stamp. And as you can see, I've taken copy paper to cover the flowers and the parts of the owl that I don't want stamped on, and just doing that so it's like a bit of a shadow in the background. And repeat that on the other side. And these little details do make all the difference. And maybe some more just to the top as well. And it looks like there's some in the background, some nice leaves. So the next thing then is I think we're going to start the colouring, and I like to start with the eyes first of all. And I've decided that I wanted the eyes to look a little bit more realistic, and in order to create a base for the colouring, I've taken my white gesso, and as you can see, with a brush and some water, I'm just painting in with the gesso, painting in the eyes to create a blank base for colouring. And this is a technique you can use in any part of the picture if you wanted the colour to be more opaque. In terms of colour, you can't really see that, but it's like a pale peachy brown. And I'm going to begin by darkening the top there. I don't think you actually see that in the end up, but I'm just going around the edges with this colour, and then I'll be creating more dimension with yellow gel pen and also some black. Now add the light, which is a really fun part, I always think, to bring eyes to life. A few dots here and there at the top. There we go. And now starting the colouring of the owl. Now you could leave the owl just as he is, and that would be absolutely fine, but I thought I would enhance the background a bit. I've started there with a pale lilac colour going over the branches, because what you have to bear in mind is that whatever colour you put on top, unless you've used the gesso first, it's going to mix with the ink colour below. So that's why I've used the pale lilac, because mixing it with pink and orange will make it look brown. And I'm just adding the impression of branches really in the background, just very lightly. And these Zig watercolour markers are great to use for all these little details that you don't want to be too opaque. And where you do want the opacity, as I'm doing here, this yellow gel pen is great for adding light. And in the same way as with the background, where there's dappled sunlight and leaves to one side, I'm keeping the side of the owl quite light and using this pinky colour, which is just a pale pink, to add some shadow underneath the feathers and just a nod of dimension here. And where the light might be hitting the top at the right hand side, our right hand side, I'm going to use yellow and white and very pale colours down one side. And I'm working with what the Dinkles have already done to the owl, and I'm keeping the same tones and really just enhancing what I have. I'm moving on now to a darker pink, and I think I blend that in also to parts of the leaves. Just work what you have with what you have, and just have a wee think where the shadows might be, and use darker colours and paler colours where light will naturally touch the feathers. And this is just a base. I'm using even a green, I think it's a bluey green colour. So down the left hand side, I'm thinking that there'd be more cool tones and brighter, whiter, pastely tones on the right. And there you see that I'm adding some more white at the tips, and where I think that sunlight would touch the owl down the side. And just adding highlights on the feet and to some of the feathers on the beak, very important. The bits that are sticking out would be touched by the sunlight. So now that the base is pretty much in place, where you want very bold colour to make it pop, you use the Posca pens, because this doesn't blend, or the pens I should say, the Posca pens don't blend with the background in the same way as the Zig clean colour markers do. They really sit on top and their colour is a lot more opaque. And there I've just added lots of the turquoise down one side and to the centre, along with pinks and yellows. Essentially, I think really those are and maybe pale pink, and I mixed them with the white and yellow gel pen. Now next I'm going to colour in one of the flowers, so you have an idea of how that is done. I'm not going to make you watch me colour in all of them because that would be very boring. So I'm mainly using gel pens and Posca pens again for this. And going back to what I said earlier about how you blend colours in a picture, I'm taking a lot of the tones from the background and I'm mirroring those in the owl and in the flowers to create balance. And this is wonderful because this, all you have to do here is colour in in the little dots that are already provided, and it is very relaxing just to take your pens and do colouring in. And this balances with the colours on the owl's feathers and also picks up on some of the tones in the background and in the foreground. And it's very fun to do, and if you stick to the same colours and tones, generally, no matter what your medium, they'll mix nicely for you. I'm taking the lilac again and mixing it in with the ink at the bottom there, just to darken the bottom, to create dimension, to make it look more three-dimensional. And then I decided, I think, to add little tiny orbs flowing up from the flowers. And to do that, all I'm doing is using my yellow gel pen to make tiny little dots, and I'm going to mix that with the white as well, just to give a wee extra something. So now they're all done, just like magic, and they tone in very nicely with the owl and draw, as I say, the colours of the overall picture together. And for some sparkle now towards the end, first of all I'm taking this beautiful sparkle pen in gold, and where I think the light would touch elements in the picture, I'm just tracing those out very lightly, just to make the little flowers pop a little bit more, and the tops of the ferns, just a touch here and there. Now some leaves, not all of them, just a little bit. And also on the feathers, and where the light might hit some areas of the face and the little feathers on the background against the sunlight. And really just repeating what I've said before in terms of highlights, and where you think the light might touch certain parts of the owl and the foliage and the flowers. And there you can see hopefully it twinkling. I must say it's more difficult to get this on camera than it is in person, but I hope you get the idea, and it adds an extra dimension. Now I've mounted up the picture onto black and white card, and I'm about to add the stickles. This time it's lime green, and I'm just dotting these about randomly just to add additional sparkle, just wherever I think the light might hit, add the little finishing touches. And that's it, that's more or less it. The picture is now complete. all the elements are in place, and I really hope you enjoyed today's project. And of course, until I see you again, take very good care of yourselves. Until next time.